Okay, welcome back. So from the last video, we mentioned that we were going to try a leaving cert question about stock valuation. And the one I've chosen to attempt today is the 2007 question 8, part B. So question 8, 2007, part B, stock valuation. I've placed this exam paper in a folder marked stock valuation for you to, if you want to have a look at it there. So here's what the question is. It gives you some information about a shop or a retail store. So Cape Limited is a retail store that buys and sells one commodity. So like in the last video where we talked about a business that just sold spoons, this is a similar shop that just sells one item. Now, just looking at some of the figures down here, they're purchasing things for €5 and selling them for like 10 and 11. I'm going to say, just for the sake of making it a bit clearer or easier to understand or a bit more real, why don't we say that this shop just sells calculators? One type of calculator, maybe a Casio calculator, one model, one type. Okay, so it says the following information relates to the purchases and sales of the firm for the year 2006. Okay, so it had a whole bunch of purchases on credit, and just like the spoons in the last video, we can see that from the 1st of January 2006 to the 31st of March 2006, it purchased this many of 3,200 calculators, and they cost €5 each to purchase. But then as the year went on, from April to the end of June, the price of calculators went up for this shop to purchase from their suppliers. Suddenly they were costing them €7, and in the third quarter of the year they were purchasing them for €8, and by the end of the year, the last quarter, they were costing the shop €9 each to buy. And the same goes throughout the year, I suppose. As their costs went up, they were selling the calculators at different prices. They started selling them at €10 and then €11 and finally up to €13. Now, what we've got here, though, is all of their purchases were on credit. It means that they didn't pay for them right away. They got the calculators from their suppliers and they were going to pay them at a later date. Some of their sales were on credit. In other words, some people came into the shop, took their calculators away and paid them later on, not immediately. And some of their sales were for cash. Some people came into the shop as you'd normally expect in a shop, handed over their money and took away their calculators. Okay, so all of this here is about sales. This is about purchases. And then the last thing, I suppose, that last piece of information we get in the question is that on the 1st of January, the 1st of the 1st, 2006, so at the very start of the year, there was an opening stock of 3,500 units at €5 each. So that means that there was, they already had 3,500 calculators in the storeroom of the shop at the very beginning of the year before they started buying or selling any calculators. And those calculators had cost them €5 each when they had purchased them, which must have been in the previous year. Okay, so the first thing that you're required to calculate is the value of closing stock using the first in, first out method that we discussed in the last video. So in order to calculate the value of the closing stock, so the value is how much in euros the closing stock was worth. So how much the calculators that they had in their warehouse at the end of the year was worth, or in their back room, in their stock room, how much they were worth. But in order to calculate their value, their worth, we need to first find out how many calculators they had, how many individual units or calculators they had in their stock room at the end. So in order to get started with that, first of all, we will have a look at the opening stock. They started the year with 3,500 units. So we start with that. 3,500 units. That's their opening stock. Okay, let's get in there. Opening stock 3,500. Okay. During the year then, they made all these purchases of calculators from their suppliers. They got all these calculators in. So I'm going to just add those four figures, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those figures together. Now, if I add them together, let's just do a quick thought in my head. Get 8,700, okay? So I'm going to say plus 8,700. That's plus the purchases. So if you can imagine, if, for instance, this shop hadn't sold any of their calculators, then at the end of the year, they'd have the ones they started with and all of the rest of them that they bought during the year. That would be the total amount they'd be left with. In other words, that would be their closing stock. But as it happens, they did sell some during the year, and they sold until it's less blurry, they sold this many on credit and this many for cash. But either way, this many left their shop and also this many left their shop. They sold them to somebody and somebody took them away. Okay, so if we add all of those together, let's see, 2, 3, 7, 8, 5, 8,500, that adds up to it. Now we're adding all of these and all of these to give me 8,500 units. So if they sold 8,500 units, well, they started with this many, they bought this number in, so they got this many more calculators into the shop during the year. They sold this many, so this many left the shop. So what they were left with at the end of the year is this plus this minus this, which comes to 3,700. Or in other words, that's their closing stock. Now, that is not the answer to part A, though, unfortunately, of this, because part 1, rather, says calculate the value of closing stock. That is just the amount of closing stock. That's 3,700 units, or as we've said in this, we've called them calculators. That's how many they've got, but it's not the value of the calculators. So this is where first in, first out comes into it. If you have 3,700 units left, okay, then the ones that are left, just like we said, first in, first out also means last in, last out, okay? So if you have 3,700 left at the end of the year, well, the first ones you should have sold were the ones you had at the very beginning of the year. The 3,500 that you bought last year, because they were first in, they were there before any of these. The next ones you should have sold were the ones you bought at the start of the year. The next ones you should have sold are these, next ones you should have sold are these, and the next ones you should have sold are these 1,400 that you bought towards the end of the year. So if you have any left over at the end of the year, they have to come from the last batch at the very least. But if we've got, as we said, 3,700 units left at the end of the year, that means we definitely must have all of this 1,400 that we bought in, we'll say, December at the end of the year. Okay, so we must have all of that 1,400. Now, we had more than 1,400 left over. So if I subtract the 1,400 from this 3,700, I get 2,300. So there's another 2,300 that we've got left beside this 1,400. So we must have all of this 2,000 that we bought between the 1st of the 7th and the 30th of the 9th. We must have all of these also, because 2,300 is greater than 2,000. So we must have all of those. So if I add the two of these together, 1,400 and 2,000, that's 3,400. I know I had 3,700 left at the end of the year, so I had all of these plus another 300 if I subtract these two from this, plus another 300. And those 300 calculators must have come from this batch here that I purchased in the second quarter of the year. So I don't have the full 2,100 left. I've sold some of them, but I've got 300 of them left. So I must also put in that 300. Now, these are units. If I add these all together, it should come to the number or the amount of closing stock I had left. But the value then is how much each of these cost me. So the 1,400 at the end of the year, well, they cost me €9 each because I bought them at the end of the year when they were at their most expensive because of inflation. They were going up all throughout the year. So if I multiply that by 9, I get, 12,600, isn't it? Okay. The 2,000 that I bought in the third quarter, they cost me €8 each. So if I multiply that by 8, 16, isn't it? Okay. And the 300, we said, came from this batch. So that batch in total cost €7 each. So those 300 were bought at a price of €7 each. So that's what, 2,100. So the total cost, or the total value of the stock that I had left over, these 3,700 units at the end of the year, is this plus this plus this, isn't it? 30,700 euros. And that's the answer to part one, the value of the closing stock using the first in, first out method, because last in, last out, these were the last in, so they're the last to be sold. They must be still in my closing stock. These are still in my closing stock, and a portion of these 2,100 are still in my closing stock. Okay, we'll do part two in the next video.